What did my daughter do when my husband forgot to mention a huge family decision until after he'd already decided? Wednesday night, my husband Leon sits down at dinner. He says, so I told my parents we'd do Christmas at their place this year. Just like that. Past tense, told. Already done. I look at him. I say, when did we decide that? He says, it makes sense, they're getting older. I say, Leon, when did we discuss this? He says, I just assumed you'd be fine with it. My 10-year-old daughter, Cass, is eating her dinner. She puts her fork down. She looks at Leon. She looks at me. She looks at Leon again. She picks up her notebook. She opens it to a new page. She says, Dad? He says, yeah. She says, what's the date of the decision? He blinks. He says, I called them this morning. She writes this morning. She shows him. She says, what's the date of the discussion with Mom? He looks at the table. He says, I didn't. She writes, no discussion. She draws a line between the two entries. She says, here's the issue. She shows him both lines. She says, this line is the problem. She points to the space between them. She says, the decision happened before the discussion. He says, I knew she'd say yes. Cass writes, knew she'd say yes. She shows him. She says, how? He says, because it makes sense. She writes, assumed. She shows him. She says, Dad. He says, Cass. She says, assuming someone will agree is not the same as asking. He says, it's just Christmas. She tilts her head. She says, is it? She opens to a previous page. She reads. She says, last Christmas we hosted 23 people. She shows him her notes. She has Christmas data going back 2 years. She reads. She says, last year, Mom started preparing November 14th. She says, she ordered special plates in October. She shows him she has a photo of the plates on her phone. She shows him the order date, October 9th. She says, the Christmas decision affects November and October. She looks at him. She says, you made it in a phone call this morning. He looks at the phone order date. He looks at the notebook. He says, I didn't think about the prep. Cass says, I know. She closes the notebook. She says, here's what I think should happen. He waits. She says, you call your parents back. She says, you tell them it's not confirmed yet. She says, you and Mom discuss it tonight. She looks at him. She says, and if you both agree to their house, great. She says, but Mom gets to agree. She looks at me. She says, right? I say, right. Cass looks at Leon. She says, right? Leon says, right. He picks up his phone. He dials. He tells his mother it's not confirmed yet. He tells her they'll call back Thursday. He hangs up. He looks at Cass. She has her notebook open. She's writing. He says, what are you writing? She shows him. She's written, decision paused, discussion scheduled. He reads it. He nods. She looks at him. She says, also Dad. He says, yeah. She says, how many of our decisions happen this way? He's quiet. He says, I don't know. She turns to a new page. She says, I'm going to start a log. He looks at her. She says, a family decision log? She says, who was consulted? She says, before or after? She draws 2 columns. She labels them, before, after. She shows him. He reads the columns. He says, how long are you planning to keep that? She says, until the ratio changes. He reads, before and after. He looks at me. I am eating my dinner very peacefully. He looks at Cass. He says, can I see the log when you have data? She looks at him. She says, you want to see it? He says yes. She writes that down. He reads what she wrote. She's written, Leon requested to see the log. He signed up for accountability. She shows it to him. She says, is that? She notes it and adds a star. He asks what it means, and she says it means something good happened. She closes the notebook and eats her dinner. Leon eats quietly, thinking, glancing once more at the columns before she puts it away. Before and after, waiting. Cass, age 10, 2-column architect, star assigner. She started back in October because the columns needed filling.